Welcome to MidLIFE Matters, where we celebrate women's wisdom and wit. I'm Georgianne Lucy, your host, and I am delighted to introduce Beverly Sniegowski, who is a writer for the Wallingford magazine and an advocate and the administrator of Wallingford Veterans Coffee House. Welcome, Beverly.
Thank you very much. Hello.
Hello. Delighted to have you here. So writing is a new venture for you.
Yes, definitely.
And how did that come about to be involved with the Wallingford magazine?
Well, I moved here 4 years ago, not knowing what I wanted to do. I'm originally from Wallingford.
Okay.
I grew up in Wallingford. I found a little apartment in town just for myself. My husband had passed away, so I decided to come back home.
All right.
And when I did, I found this lovely little apartment, and one day a magazine showed up at my door, the Wallingford magazine, not knowing what it was.
Yeah.
I was very curious, and I decided to write a story and submit it to the editor, not knowing what he was going to do with it.
Right.
So I wrote an email, and I suggested that he perhaps use it in the magazine, and if not, put it in the round file.
There you go.
I wasn't sure what he was going to do or if he was even interested. But 2 weeks later, yes, I did get an email from him requesting a meeting to go over the possibility of my story going into his magazine, which it did.
Great.
It was called Empty Boots, was my first story, and it was about the American soldiers that left Afghanistan on August 26, 2021, and the difficulties that they had when they did leave. I don't know what possessed me to write this story. It just hit me that, because it was so tragic, and then it shouldn't have happened, because we were almost out of there within days. We were almost out of there, then the Kabul airport was bombed.
Right.
And 13 soldiers were killed, among other civilians.
Right.
So at 3 o'clock in the morning, I just started writing like mad. And I wrote this story probably in an hour and a half because I was so passionate about it.
Right.
But I do come from a military family, which maybe brought this on. But it was just the heartache of our troops not, getting out in time and being murdered right there at Kabul airport.
Okay.
And the explosion was not an explosion that you would think of maybe TNT or some kind of fiery explosion. It was ball bearings that was expelled from the explosion into these people that killed them, which is just a terrible way to suffer. So in any event, I wrote this story called Empty Boots, and it was not about the soldiers per se directly. It was about, it kind of came around how I felt and how I perceived these kids that left Wallingford and or left from wherever they were leaving from, and were killed at such a young age. So it's a very interesting story. If you haven't read it, you really should, because it's I found it just very passionate to write, and Tarn Granucci, the editor of the magazine, loved it.
Great.
And so
Super.
that's how it started. So he hired me as a staff writer, and I've been writing ever since, and I think I've written probably, 12 or 13
Nice.
Articles.
Yeah.
So
Super.
Yeah.
And what do you find most satisfying about writing? Again, something new for you.
oh my gosh, it's a diversity of each story. It's not just one genre. It's not just one type of topic, or it's all different kinds. I've written so many stories, such as in March we have candlelight vigil at the Vietnam Memorial, and this signifies the end of the Vietnam War. So we've had, several veterans come, and we talk. We have a vigil there for the past 2 years. I did a story about Mother's Day. I did a story about Pat Russo's music school. I did a story about the Baptist Church, who has been going down to the Dominican Republic for the past 30 years on charitable quests. And I don't know if you know about that, but they go down there with a couple hundred people now from all over the country also.
Okay.
It started here, and it kind of just branched out into different areas of the country. Go down there and help these people rebuild after disasters and so forth. So he's a really interesting person. He works for Quinnipiac.
Okay.
The Twilight Tunes that we just had was a story about the bands that were on the green, the wishing well. I mean, I just have several
That's wonderful.
different
So a lot
stories
of different.
that I found interest in and that I had fun with.
Sure.
I'm kind of a fun writer, and we all have our different personalities.
Right.
One gal, she does all the historical
Okay.
aspects of the magazine, and she's wonderful. She's an unbelievable, researcher. And there's another one who maybe targets sports in the schools,
Okay.
Education, arts, and I do kind of like the fun things and interesting things connected maybe to the Veterans Coffee House.
Sure.
Like the one I did called 32 Candles, where 32 people showed up and we did the candlelight vigil.
Nice.
And so,
Okay.
yeah.
So you do have the support of the local veterans, and that began with an item in the Senior Center newsletter.
Right.
Okay. And so what sparked your interest, and who was your first point of contact?
When I received that flyer in the mail, again, I did see that there was a speaker, Bob Lombardo, who was a Vietnam medic. So I said, geez, I think I'll go and see what this is all about. I've never been to the Senior Center, didn't know anything about it. And when I came into the room, must have been maybe 20 or 25 veterans, all wearing their colors, their hats, their badges, Vietnam, very proud of what they were, what they did. And so this fellow, Bob Lombardo, who at 19 years old was a medic in the combat field. He received 5 Purple Hearts and 2 Bronze Stars. I don't know if you know what a Purple Heart is. It's when you get injured or when you get, in combat.
Sure.
5 times he received a Purple Heart. Twice he received a Bronze Star for heroism. So he was fascinating. He just gripped me.
Yeah.
And I never thought that I would be interested in anything like this, in veterans on this level.
Sure.
And I could not wait to talk to the person in charge, which is Mark Halliday, the founder of the coffee house here in Wallingford.
Okay.
And he founded the coffee house in 2017. So now we're up to about 40 to 60 veterans because I started to advertise in the Advisor and also in the magazine.
Okay.
And a lot of the veterans came in, they didn't even know anything about us, and so it worked. And now we have about 60 that show up, which is unbelievable.
That is unbelievable. And how does it operate? So monthly?
It's a monthly, yes, it is a monthly. And we do get donations from several businesses in town. So we are supported in that way where the foodstuffs come in for the breakfast and so forth. The Senior Center is kind enough to give us coffee, all the coffee that we need, and setups and so forth. And they clean up after us, which is nice.
You have a speaker typically?
Oh, yes, every month.
Okay.
And that's my job to find speakers.
All right.
Myself and Mark. And it kind of snowballs because one veteran will say, geez, Bev, I know somebody else that would want to speak. Would you be interested? I said, sure. Of course, I'll talk to them. And I'll find out what their background was and go through the channels of getting him on board or on deck, for his appearance.
Sure.
So I've already booked into 2024.
Great.
I'm up to August already.
Wow.
The veterans helping me and the connections that we have through other agencies or whatever the case may be. That's where we're finding these speakers, and they're very willing to come. And they don't get paid. They do this on their own.
Sure.
On their own time, which is very generous.
And what do you find most satisfying about your role with the Veterans Coffee House? And also, we can talk a little bit about some of the other, you talked about the candlelight ceremony and doing banners and the gold leaf and so forth.
These men are exceptional. It's been 50 years since they've been at war. It's been 50 years. I've known, the men who have served in Korea and also World War II. But 90% of them are the Vietnam veterans. These men, like I said, are so exceptional. They are so proud of what they did. We may have not have treated them very well when they came back, but it doesn't matter to them. They know what they did, and they know what kind of job they had to do, and they know that it was important to this country to protect our shores and to protect our well-being. And they wear their colors proudly, and they talk about it. they wear their hats every day. You see them in the stores and the streets, and they have their Vietnam hats on. You know, so and I hear their stories. I have been blessed with them telling me their stories, because this is so difficult for them to share.
Sure.
Because they can be so graphic. And people will say to me, geez, Bev, you know, you're very fortunate to hear these stories, because they won't even tell their own wives. And it's so hard for them to bring up these stories. But I have this capability, I think, to just be patient and quiet and not pepper them with questions. I'm sympathetic, and you know, you don't tap them on the shoulder and say, oh, it's okay, you know, and everything. No, you don't do that.
Right.
You know, these men have been through hell and back, and if you don't mind me saying that. And there was one fellow I spent almost 3 hours with, and at the end of that conversation, him telling me his stories and showing me photographs, he was crying on my shoulder. So this is what I get out of it. I get so much feeling. You can ask Bill too. When I was talking with him, when I first met your husband Bill, he was talking about the veterans, and I lost it for a minute, and I had to turn away, because I do weep for these guys. I still do, because of what they've been through, and the stories that I hear, and the things that I see.
Yeah.
Things that I see on the streets or in my own church.
Yeah.
You know, they pull at your heart for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then you've held this candlelight vigil at the Vietnam Memorial, which is on the green there at the north end of Main Street.
Yes.
And then you spearheaded this effort to redo the gold lettering for those killed in action.
Yes, the KIAs. You're right.
Okay, you want to talk about that a little
Sure,
bit?
sure. This past March of this year, we did notice that the 12 names that were KIA, the gold had worn off from the weather and over
Sure.
time, over
Yeah.
the years. This was installed, I think, in 1984.
Okay.
And they were emblazoned with the gold at the time, and it had all worn off. So I wasn't quite sure where to start, so I started with the town hall with George Messier. He's a veterans advocate in town. I don't know if you know George.
I've met him, actually, yeah.
Very nice fellow.
Yeah.
And so he said, Bev, you know, just put together some quotes. I call the In Memoriam Cemetery, because at cemeteries, of course, they do color in the engravings on.
Yeah.
And so she did have an engraver.
Okay.
So she gave me his name, and I looked up 2 others myself and put the 3 quotes together and submitted them to the town hall. And George said he would. I put it on. I said, George, it's on your desk now. Let's see what happens. And because you know, you have to have money in the budget
Sure.
to fulfill these kind of requests. It did come to fruition, and yes, we did get that filled with gold leaf.
Nice.
The town accepted it. It was within their budget. So I thought that was so wonderful. I drove by not too long ago, and the sun was hitting it just right, and all the gold just flashed in front of my
Wonderful.
eyes. And I just had to stop my car, and I was like smiling ear to ear, because I
Yeah.
was so happy that it had been done.
That's great.
Yeah, it would just look beautiful.
And at the ceremony, you've arranged some bunting. We have a photo and
Yes.
people's photos. Of,
Right. Of the 12 that were KIA, were killed in action, I did find their photos online of all these young men from Lyman Hall,
Yeah.
from Wallingford, and I put them on a display with the you know, the bunting on the bottom, American flag bunting, and I wrapped the Lyman Hall scarf around the top that has the insignia of the Trojan
Nice.
on the corner.
Yeah. Super. Very thoughtful.
So it was amazing too that a lot of these people, they saw this display, they walked up to it, and I could hear whispers in amongst the group saying, "I knew that kid. I went to
Yeah.
school with that kid. I never knew what happened to him, and look, he died
Yeah.
he died in Vietnam."
Yep.
And I'm just, you know, there's over 600 names on that memorial. I don't know if you realize that. It's over
No.
686 names. My brother's name is on there. He served in Vietnam, John Churchill.
Okay.
And a lot of the boys I recognize. A lot of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, very meaningful.
Yes.
So let's take a little look back at your career And so for about 10 years, you were in sales for a catering company, and you're a self-described people person. So tell us about some of the highlights of your work. I know you had a couple stories that you shared with me.
Oh boy, yes. Let's see. Well, I can start with the first one. The very first one was Champions on Ice. They approached me and asked me if I wanted to be in sales because I was just in the office working as a secretary, and they thought they had seen something in me that I might be fitted for us on the road sales. And I was very surprised, but I thought maybe I should take a chance at this. And so the first one I targeted was Champions on Ice. Now you have to remember this was back in the 80s or 90s, maybe 90s. And so we had faxes and phones.
Right.
Faxes and phones is all we had to work with. Now these Champions on Ice, they were coming to the New Haven Coliseum. I didn't know where they were coming from.
Okay.
So I started just making phone calls to the Coliseum first to see who was in charge of this tour coming in.
Sure.
And it kind of just snowballed from there, and I backtracked all the way to Minnesota and found them. But it took me a couple of weeks because I could not find the right person to contact to see if they would be interested in a catering firm coming in to feed the crew and the skaters at the Coliseum, because they, if they were interested in that kind of setup. And it panned out finally, yes, and we did. So I was just amazed that I even found them. But I'm the kind of person that doesn't give up.
Okay.
If I have a challenge, then I am set to fulfill that. And so I was pretty happy with the first one. Because that was a difficult one because it wasn't in town.
And didn't you have lunch with Michelle?
I had lunch with Michelle Kwan. I met all the skaters there at the Coliseum. They were quite nice and lovely, and we sat as a group, and she was sitting with us having lunch, and we just chatted about her career. Yeah. So
Wonderful.
that was a lot of fun. Yes.
And another one involved a helicopter.
The ice sculpture for Sikorsky.
Okay.
Sikorsky, when they design a new helicopter, send it to different areas of the world too. When they do it, huge events, but they want to do something small for the office and the staff, all the executives here. I suggested to the event planner for Sikorsky, how would you like that helicopter in ice?
Okay.
And she thought that was just amazing. And I didn't even know if my ice carver could do that.
Okay.
And which is Ice Matters out of Cheshire.
All right.
So I gave him a photograph of the helicopter with the windows and the back rotor and the cockpit, everything about it. And he says, "Geez, Bev, I don't know." He says, "I've never done one before." He said, "But I want to try," because he's exceptional too. He's very well known. So when he came into our ballroom with the body of the helicopter, we put it on the large banquet table, and then he came in with the blades, which are 5 blades made out of ice. And we couldn't believe what we were seeing, that he actually could make blades out of ice. And he placed it very, very carefully on top of the helicopter, put the spotlights on it, and it just glistened beautifully. When the suits came in from Sikorsky and all the staff from the office, it was a big wow.
Yeah.
They just stopped, and they could not believe what they were seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Now, just out of curiosity, how do ice sculptures like that last long enough for an event?
Well, the events are 4 hours, 5 hours.
Okay.
Yep. And
They
of course, they're solid ice.
Yeah.
It's not hollow. So it does last quite a long time because it is made out of a block of ice.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow, that's
It's
incredible.
chiseled and finely tuned and whatnot, with the lights maybe coming down on it, but it did last the whole event.
Good.
Yeah.
Now, was something you learned about wrestlers and their dietary habits?
Right. We also catered at the New Haven Coliseum for the WWF at the time. It's now called WWE. The wrestlers were, huge men.
Right.
Huge. They were very polite, and when they came off of the stage and dressed in their street clothes and they were ready to eat, they wanted things that were good for them, that were healthy. Steamed food, steamed chicken, things with no butter and so forth, which we all thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Being such these big burly guys,
Yeah.
are very careful of what they have to eat, to keep themselves in shape.
Sure.
You know.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
They were a lot of fun.
I
They were a lot of
imagine.
fun.
and thinking of the influences in your life, so tell us a little bit about your mom, because it sounds like she had an interesting profession, and I'm sure that was an inspiration for you.
She grew up on a farm in Illinois. And the town itself had 4 roads coming into the middle, just north, south, east, west. And in
Yeah.
the middle was a statue of Abraham Lincoln, of course, because that's where Lincoln was born. It was all farm country. She was very adventurous, extremely adventurous. She had no fear. She wanted to do something exciting with her life. She became a photographer, a professional photographer during World War II, and she traveled across country by train. She was hired to go to military bases and take photos of the planes, of the crafts, and also the military men,
Sure.
okay, the pilots and so forth. She, after years had gone by, she decided to move to New York, and she had a little studio apartment in New York,
Yeah.
and she worked at her own studio, actually, in New York City.
Well, there's the adventure part. That's a great inspiration, right? She just
All
wanted
by
to
yourself.
do something and just did
Just
it,
all by
which
yourself.
particularly at that time,
Yes.
yes,
Was amazing.
yes.
My mom was an
definitely.
amazing woman. She did meet my dad in Illinois through friends. She had gone back, and he was studying at a college in St. Louis University, I believe
Okay.
it was. He was going to be a engineer, wanted to become an engineer, and he became an aeronautical engineer.
Okay.
And he worked for Grumman Aircraft on Long Island during the time when we were putting a man on the moon.
Neat.
So they met at a party and eventually got married, and they moved.
Okay.
They moved here to Connecticut. He gave her a choice of either living on Long Island, because that's where he worked or was going to be working, or she said, no, I don't want to bring my kids up
Right.
in Long Island. So that's how we wound up in Wallingford.
All right.
And he traveled to Long Island every week. He was gone all week, and he was home just on the weekends. This was back in the 60s. So he was on the team of engineers that developed the LEM that landed on the moon.
Okay.
So that was an exciting time for the world and the country.
And that's a great source of inspiration. Then you have a grandfather, and tell us just a little bit about the ship.
Well, he was a graduate of MIT, also an engineer. He worked for Stone and Webster, which is in Boston, an engineering firm. He knew he just wanted to build this craft, which was a John Alden design. It took him 10 years because he was still working, and it took him 10 years because he did it himself.
Okay.
It was a 48-foot ketch made out of exotic woods. Everything was precision to him, being an engineer. Everything was methodical. Everything had to be perfect. On my dad's side of the family, they were just 2 brilliant men that did so much with their lives.
Yeah. And your mom. So that's
and my mother
that's
was
the
yes.
arts and the science.
That's right.
That's wonderful. Absolutely.
That's right.
And as we get to this point in our lives where we can have a lot to look back on, I'd like to ask you what advice you'd give your younger self.
Advice I give my younger self. I had to think about this question. I guess not to be afraid of decisions. I mean, that's how you learn to decide what path is best for you and what kind of people you want to be inspired by. I was inspired by my husband, Bernie. Not knowing him at the time, but we eventually did get married. He was an engineer. He inspired me too. He never faltered when he wanted to work on different projects. He built our house. He was just a wonderful, wonderful person, and he would.
So your advice would be marry Bernie again.
Yeah, that would
Okay.
be. But not be afraid of decisions. I
Okay.
guess and just be around people that are going to inspire you as you
Absolutely.
age.
Yeah.
He was a little bit older than me, but I was drawn to him because he had a passion for life.
Wonderful.
And you can't find that in too many people at that young age.
Yep.
At 25, at 25 years old, you want great cars, you
Yeah.
want a house, you want your friends, and I was different. We traveled a lot. We
Okay.
traveled to all parts of the world together. I was very, very fortunate at that age.
Yes, that's
Very,
wonderful.
very fortunate because he was able to travel for his work.
Mm-hmm.
You were going to ask me about advice at 40?
Well, that and your favorite quote as we're closing in now.
Okay. Well, at 40, you're kind of halfway through your life.
Yeah, midlife, sure.
Your midlife. And you tend to want to spend because you have a few bucks in the bank.
Yeah,
And you want to, just have fun. And I would say just you want to live without worry. And so I think the smart thing to do is probably invest at 40 years old. But we all tend to overspend when we get to
Okay.
be that age.
And do you have a favorite quote?
Yes, I do. It's from Winston Churchill, and it's fear is a reaction, courage is a decision.
I love it. Thank you so much, Beverly, for
You're very
being
welcome,
our guest.
and thank you.
And please tune in to hear other fascinating women on future segments of Midlife Matters. I'm Georgianne Lucier, your host, and thank you for joining us.